In this How-To-Svelte, we're going to build a calendar with a scheduler feature. And if you go over to W3 Schools, their How-To section, and just look up calendar, you'll see what they have here is basically a CSS project. But what we're going to do is take this HTML and CSS and add some functionality to it, and have everything be current and accurate, but we'll use the JavaScript Date object to do that. We'll also make these arrows functional so that we can advance to the next month. And here's an example of that. So you can see as I click on the arrow, we're advancing to the next month. The days are changing. And even we can advance to the next year as well. So let's go ahead and get started with the first part. We'll just work on the calendar. That'll be video number 1. And then part 2, video number 2, will work with the scheduler. So let's go ahead and copy the HTML and CSS from this calendar page. And so one of the first things we're going to do is take all of our HTML and surround it with main tags. So go ahead and make a main tag. And then in the CSS, look for the body rule and replace that with main. Now, if we look at the HTML we have here, the very first main part is the div with a class of month with an unordered list and then 3 li tags in there. Let's go ahead and clean this up a little bit. We'll move the span down as well as the closing li tag. And then you can see the top part is bleeding over. So let's just come down to the CSS. And for the month, we'll replace 100% with auto. And so that brings it back in. Let's go down to the next major part, which is the weekdays. And we'll take Sunday, which is the last li tag, and we'll make it the first li tag. And you'll see when we use the JavaScript Date object and we get the day, that Sunday is actually the 0 index. Monday's 1, Tuesday's 2, all the way up to Saturday, which is 6. And then if we look at the third part of this, which are the days themselves, W3 Schools just hard-coded a bunch of li tags, but we're going to use a Svelte each loop to generate these. So let's add a Svelte each loop. And we're going to go ahead and use the array object. Make an array with 42 indices. And we'll also make sure to use Svelte's index counter. And so when we do that, you can see we get 42 places, and we're going to treat this as a grid. And let's go ahead, instead of hard coding 1, we'll use the index. And so now we get our 42 numbers. Now let's just adjust the CSS a bit. Okay, so that's the starting part with just organizing the content. Now let's go ahead and use the JavaScript Date object to help get dynamic values here. So let's start off by, we'll create a constant called date, and we'll instantiate a new date object. And our first goal here is to get the month to be current. And so if I open up my calendar, you can see it's May 7th, 2021. So we'll create a variable here. We'll call it month. And we'll use a method called toLocaleString. Takes 2 arguments. So the language and where you're at. And then the second argument is an object. And we want to get the month, and the format we want to look at is long. Short would be abbreviated. So let's take the variable, and we'll come down into our HTML and replace the hard-coded August value with curly braces and then month. And so then we get May back. Well, let's go ahead and get the year. And then we'll come down to the HTML and replace 2021 Now, later on, what we're going to do is get these arrows activated so that when we click the next arrow, this would go to June, or we click the previous arrow, this would go back to April. And so this method that we're using to local string is not going to serve us very well at that point. Even when I click this arrow, it won't know what the next month is to go to. So what I'm going to do is hard code an array of months. Then we'll also create a variable called month index. And we'll use the method getMonth. Now, just so we can see what these methods produce, let's go ahead and create a reactive console log. And we'll use a JavaScript string template, so backticks, $, curly brace, and then we'll look at what month index returns. So now what we can do is we can use month index to access the values in the month names array. So let's do that. So for this let month, let's replace the toLocalString with month names, and then we'll access the current month with month index. And so we still get the same value. In fact, let's go ahead and just and so we can confirm in the console. Then the next thing we want to do is we've got the month and the year, but now we need to think about what is the first day of May. And so if we come back to looking at the calendar here, the first day of May is Saturday. And so let's create another variable. We'll instantiate a new date object. And inside we'll use the year variable as the year. We'll use the month index for the month, and then we indicate what day in the month we want to get. So we want the first. And then we'll use the method called getDay. And then let's go ahead and put this in the console as well. And so you can see our month index is 4 and our first day index is 6. And as we talked about before when we were adjusting the li tags, we put Sunday first before Monday, because Sunday is 0, and all the way up to Saturday, which is the index 6. Then the next thing we need to get is the amount of days in each month. So how many days are there in May? There's 31 days. So let's make another variable called numberOfDays. Again, we'll instantiate a new date object. We'll use year, month index. And then the way we're going to determine the number of days is all we have to do is look at the last day of the month. So let me just open up Apple's calendar here. So you can see if we're in May, if we want to determine how many days are in June, just look at the last day, which is the 30th. So we know there's 30 days. We need the year, we need the month index, and the way we get the day of the last day of the previous month is by making the third argument be 0. So 0 indicates, oh, this is the last day of the previous month. And then the method we need to use with this is getDate. So now if we look at numberOfDays, you can see the number of days is 30, so that's incorrect. And the reason it's incorrect is our month index, you can see our month index here is 4. So 4 indicates May. So we're really saying, all right, with the 0, give me the last day in April. We're actually asking for the last day of the previous month. If this is May, here's the last day of April. So if we want to get the last day of May, we have to actually add 1 to the month index. And when we do that, you can see the number of days changes to 31, which is correct. So now let's go down into our HTML where we're generating these numbers here, these cells. And what we have to do is, if you can see here, the li tag is just rendering the index. And the first one starts with 0. So we have to somehow adjust this. We have to make an equation here so that 1, which is on Monday, ends up on Saturday. And we don't want to hard code numbers. We actually want to use some of the variables that we've generated up here because these will be flexible. So the first day index is 6. So if we take the index and minus the first day index, what happens? And you just take a look at how it shifted, and we're close. Looks like we overshot it by 1. And so we're dealing with a negative number here. So we need to add 1 in order to compensate. And when we do that, then now the first ends up on a Saturday. Now, in order to hide these negative numbers, and in order to hide all the numbers after 31, we can use a Svelte if block. And before I do that, I'm going to actually rename this. Instead of get first day index, I'll just call it first day index. And so if the counter is less than first day index, and then we'll close the if, and let's also put an else statement in here. Okay, so our logic in our if statement is if the index is less than the first day index is 6, you can see that down here in the console, then we're not going to print anything. In fact, what we'll do is we'll use an HTML symbol for a space. So that's ampersand NB SP semicolon. And so you can see it puts a space here. And we want to do the same thing after 31. So we've got to put 2 rules here. If I is less than first day index, or I is greater than number of days plus first day index. You can see we're short here. Oh, we'll say greater or equal to. So if I is greater or equal to number of days plus first day index, then just put a no break space there. Else, go ahead and print the index number here. So good, we've actually used the JavaScript date methods here, which are going to be flexible values, and we've used those to produce the offset that is between the index, which starts at 0, and the first day of the month. And so today is May 7th, so we also want to get the current day here, and you can see here we have an unused CSS selector called active. So I'm going to just delete the first part of this, and we want to add the active class to the 7th, because today is the 7th. But first, let's come up here into our JavaScript, and we'll make a variable called current day. Get date. And so let's see what current day is. Okay, so month is May and current day is 7 here. And so we want to add this class at the bottom called active. We want to add active to the li tag. So we'll do class : active. So we want to add the active class when whatever's in here evaluates to true. So that is basically say when I is equal to current day. But we're off here. So we actually probably need to use this first day index again, and then -1. You experiment with the flexible values, find out how you missed, and then compensate for it. And so that's how we can add the active class to the current day. Okay, so we have all the values in our current month being fed by the JavaScript date object. So that's great. The next thing we need to do is actually get some functionality to these arrows so that when I click the previous, it goes back to April, and then it adjusts the days to 30, and it adjusts the first day in April. And then the same thing with the next arrow. So let's actually change this to a pointer. So we'll go down in our CSS. And so let's think about what we want to happen here. When we click on this arrow, we want this, whatever's generating May. Let's come up here and see what's generating the month. So right now the month is being generated by this array and then a month index that's gotten from using the getMonth method. So when I click this, when I go to June, I really want to actually just increment the month index. Or if I click the previous arrow, then I just want to decrement the month index. So that is a sign of what we want to do here with our on-click listeners and event handlers. So let's go to the li tags for these in the HTML, and we'll do on:click, and I'll copy it and paste it for the next, and we'll call this go to next month. And so let's come up here and define these. Let's keep this real simple. We'll just take the month index and we'll increment it by 1. And we'll take the previous arrow and we'll decrement it by 1. So now if we look down here, so here's the month index. So if I click this arrow, you can see it goes up to 5. If I click the previous arrow, it goes back down to 4. So that's working. But the reason it's not actually changing the date, so we're actually changing the month index. And you can see our month variable relies on month index, but it's not updating. So the brilliant thing about Svelte is that it is actually reactive. And so we can take the let keyword and replace it with the reactive symbol in Svelte. So now if I click on the next arrow, you can see it changes to June, April. And when we get to January, now if I click this, what happens is it's undefined. And so you can see the month index at 0 was January, but it can't go lower than that. And let's just go up to the top here. And so when we get to December, that month index is 11, and we can't go to 12. So that instructs us immediately how we need to refactor our event handler functions here. So let's put some conditional statements in here. And remember, 0 is January. So let's just try that. So we click up to December, and then it recycles back to 0, which is January. And so we want to do the same thing for the event handler function called go to previous month, but instead when we get down to 0, so let's go down, January, and we got December. And we're on December, the next one should be January. So good. Now when we get to January, if we want to go to December, then our year should change as well. So let's add that to our event handler function. For the previous arrow, we'll decrement it by 1. So now if I go up to December, the next is January 2022. We'll go back down to January, and then it goes to December 2020. So we've got this whole upper section working fine. Now what we need to do is get the actual numbers down here in the days to adjust properly. So when we go to December 2020, this should actually reflect how many days are in December 2020 and what is the first day. The way we can do that, believe it or not, is rather simple. We used a reactive directive here to make month reactive, and we can do the same thing for the first day index, because remember, every month is going to have a new first day index. Every month is going to have a different number of days. So let's also make these reactive. And one of the clues to suggest this to us is the fact that month index is also involved. Month index is involved in defining what month is, but it's also significant in helping us define these two variables as well, first day index and number of days. Let's see what happens. So now we've gone to June, and we have the correct number of days, and the first of the day is now Tuesday. Let's go back to May. The last day in May was Monday, the 31st, so the first day of June should be Tuesday. And so the first day of July should be Thursday. Let's check that out. Yep, and it is. So that's all we had to do, was just add these reactive symbols here. Now, the one thing you do see is that every time we go to a new month, it's the 7th is always highlighted. And that's based on our current day. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make an object called today, and I'll give it 3 properties. And so now, because there is really only one today, we only want to reflect it in our calendar as one today. This will kind of be a protective way of doing that. So now we can take anything that has got current day. So we'll replace this with today.day number. And then we use it again down here, right here, current day. So this will be today. And so we still get the same value. But now we need to add more rules. So when I is equal to today.day in this whole equation here, and so now if we click to next, you can see 7th is no longer highlighted. All three of these requirements need to happen for this to be today and for it to be highlighted as such. Now you can see when we click through the months, when we get to June, we have this whole empty row at the bottom. And what we did is we hard-coded the number 42. So we wanted 42, index positions in our array, but we don't use them all the time. So let's replace this 42 with a dynamic variable. And so right below current day, we'll call this calendar cells quantity, or you can call it cell quantity, whatever you want. What we want to do is say if first day index, because that's really what's driving this. It's when the first day ends up. See, the first day is on a Saturday, so we actually need this last row. If it were on a Friday, again, we'd need the last row. But when we get to Thursday, we may not need this last row. So let's say that. So we'll say a first day index is less than or equal to 4. And why 4? Because Thursday is 4. Remember, Sunday is 0, Monday's 1, Tuesday's 2, Wednesday's 3, Thursday's 4. So we're going to make a ternary statement here. Then we probably just need 35 positions, else give us 45, or else give us 42 index positions. So now we'll take calendar cells quantity variable, and we'll come down here and replace 42 with that. And so for May, the first day is Saturday, so we need this last row. We go to June. The first day is Tuesday. And according to our rule up here, is if you're less than or equal to 4, then you may not need this last row. But you can see it didn't work. And the reason it didn't work is for the exact same reason we had to change these variables up here. So let's make calendar cells quantity be reactive, and it will react to first day index. And first day index will react to month index, which is being set here through our arrows. Our arrows are actually only controlling this. So if we come down here to calendar cells quantity and change it to a reactive variable, now when I click over to June, you can see it gets rid of the last row. And that's because Tuesday is its day number is less than 4. Thursday is equal to 4, so it just gave us 35 cells. Sunday is 0, so it just gave us 35 cells. So the next thing we want to do is, because this is a calendar with a scheduler, we're not going to do a scheduler in this video. This is just creating the calendar. We're going to eventually want to take all this code and probably put it in its own component. So let's do that real quickly. We'll create a component called calendar. And I just copy and pasted all the code from app. And what we want to do is import calendar into app. And then we can get rid of everything in the script tags. We can get rid of everything between the main tags. And what we'll replace that with is the calendar component. We can get rid of everything in the style tags but main. And so now this is what our app component looks like, and it has calendar in here. And this is just a much cleaner look. All the logic for the calendar is inside calendar. We'll probably create another component, which will be called scheduler. So the idea is that we want to be able to click on any date. What will open up will be some kind of form that we could do CRUD operations. We could, create an appointment that we have, a dentist appointment at 8 a.m. on May 13th. But the idea is like, okay, May 12th, I click on it and some kind of modal shows up or some form, some way. You decide. I'll decide myself as well. We can compare notes. And there's some form elements that you can fill something out. fill the time out, and then add it to the list down here. And then when you close this, we want that to be stored in a Svelte writable store. So when the day is clicked on, it opens up a modal, contains some kind of form elements to add an event, or perhaps to delete an event, or to update an event. And we'll store all those events in a Svelte writable store. We'll use CRUD functionality to control the data, and Svelte writable store has various methods that will help us do that. But let's go one step further. Once we've actually added a bunch of appointments, we want that data to persist. And so let's use our browser's local storage to persist that data. So that's going to be for video 2, part 2 of Calendar with Scheduler. But today what we dealt with was a calendar and how to make it actually populate with accurate current data and to give functionality so that we can go from month to month, year to year. And we did that with the JavaScript Date object. And we did it also with truly the power of Svelte and its real true reactivity.